Hey guys, it's Monday again, and it's a brand new week. And of course it is, but it's a brand new week for me for another reason. This week, I have decided to go down to 2 podcasts a week. So we're doing Mondays and Wednesdays now. But I think that'll give me a little more time to get some work done and a little more time for you guys to catch up with your lives, because I'm coming into your lives every morning at 10 o'clock. So let's go to Mondays and Wednesdays, and we don't have quite so much Ann on your video. I want to tell you something, and you can go over and look at burgersandbands.org. I posted a longer video this morning about how grateful I am for everybody who came out and started talking or started supporting Burgers and Bands this weekend. We raised a little over $2,000, a far cry from our $100,000 that we would have done had we been able to do our event this weekend. But it's still pretty amazing because we did it all virtually, and I'm very, very grateful for everybody who did anything this weekend, whether you showed us your burger, whether you showed us your gear you were wearing, or if you actually created a fundraiser. If you want to create fundraisers, you can do that on Facebook. Please feel free to do it. It really helps us a lot. We actually make about between $500 and $1,000 a month just off of Facebook fundraisers in normal times. If we can up that during this time, since we are really missing out on our big event, we'd really appreciate that. I also want to remind you, we are live today on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, and we still need subscribers over at YouTube. I am, my kids think I am a big nerd, so because I only have 461 subscribers, so help me out here. Today, I have a special guest, and I think it's one that's really timely. I have Tara Frame from Frame and Frame Attorneys at Law. Hi, Tara.
Hi, Ann. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Great. Thank you so much for bringing me on this morning.
It's such a crazy time we're living in right now.
Oh, I know. I know. It's just, it's been bizarre having to pivot, the way we're meeting clients and talking to clients and getting things done. But it's been a good thing in certain, in a certain way. So,
well, it's probably made people more aware now, more aware of the importance of being, ready. Right?
Well, yes, I think people have realized that this is a really important topic and they need to think about it. They need to think about it for themselves. They need to think about it for their families and for their children. And it's important. I think the thing that I try to emphasize is that it's important to do when things are calm, when you're not in a crisis situation, when you can think, and make informed decisions, as opposed to the clients who call and say, oh my gosh, my parent is in the hospital. we need to get a power of attorney and all these things at the last minute. And it's not as easy to accomplish at that point. And the decisions maybe, are a little rushed. So that's, we try to emphasize to do it ahead of time, ahead of the game.
Right. Well, and before we jump right in, I want you to tell a little bit about your history, about Frame and Frame, because you have a pretty neat history. Your company's been there, your firm has been here for a long time. You want to tell everybody about it?
Yeah. I'm really proud of our firm. My father, Vernon Frame, founded the firm in 1954. He went to night school. He went to law school at University of Baltimore while he was working during the day and supporting a family at that point in time. And he practiced for a long time as a general practitioner in Pasadena in Anne Arundel County. And when I was the last of 5 children, I was the last one to go to law school, the only one to go to law school. So I was kind of his last hope. And, I pulled it through. So I worked for a larger law firm in Baltimore City for a couple of years doing insurance defense, but it really didn't leave me with the sense of satisfaction at the end of the day. I wasn't really helping anyone other than insurance companies, which I just didn't enjoy. So, he finally said, hey, I think it's time for you to come with me. And in 1996, I did make that move and started, practicing in the community and helping the residents of Anne Arundel County. I started out as a general practitioner. So I did everything, when I first started, from landlord tenant to criminal defense to personal injury, family law, so bankruptcies. So I learned a lot, about a lot of different things. So it's been a nice, it's been good for me because I'm familiar with a lot of issues that come up in daily life for people. And I can, even though I don't handle those practice areas anymore, I can guide them in the right direction.
Right.
A few years ago, well, several years ago, I really was enjoying my my estate planning, elder law, and probate, which is estate administration practice. And I decided to focus on that 100%. So I decided I wasn't going to handle any of the other cases. I was doing a lot of family law at that point in time, and workers' compensation, and decided that, you know, this is really my passion, and to help, you know, help people and to really kind of get to know families and become, you know, their family attorney. So that's what I've been doing, and really been enjoying my practice these days.
That's great. You know, people who are watching this, I want to remind you, we're going to jump into the topic, but you can leave comments. You can put comments on the right-hand side or down below, wherever you are. You can leave a comment. We will see them on the right-hand side, and we can put them up on the screen and ask Tara questions. So if you're paying attention and you see something and you're like, well, wait a minute, what about this? Tara could answer some of those questions for you. And she's also going to give us some tips for some of the things that she has to offer that you can get before you start planning. So we're going to give you some of that as well. Tara, you touched on the importance of pre-planning, and you mentioned something that I think people don't think about. They think about pre-planning as having a will, right? But you talked about having a power of attorney. Can you talk a little bit more about some of the things that when you're talking about pre-planning, what is it?
Right. So, you know, a lot of people do think about pre-planning as having a will, but while you're healthy and alive, things happen they happen, accidents happen. People get into motor vehicle accidents. People have unexpected illnesses or injuries where they have to go into the hospital. And in those situations, you need to have these legal documents in place, particularly a financial power of attorney and a healthcare power of attorney. These are documents, legal documents that, where you're appointing someone to act on your behalf. So if you're in the hospital and you go in for a surgical procedure and something happens, maybe, you're in there for several weeks, but if there's no one, if you're the person who's responsible for paying your bills or filing your taxes or getting information for certain things, you need to appoint someone to do that for you. So that would be the power of attorney. And likewise, if you have an accident and you're not able to make healthcare decisions. So if your doctor is trying to decide what kind of treatment to give you or what type of procedures to perform, weighing the risks and benefits of certain treatments, who are they going to look to give them guidance and make those decisions for you if you can't make those decisions? So, a lot of times in certain situations, those powers of attorney are more important than having a will, because the will deals with after you've passed. These
right.
other documents and legal instruments deal with while you're still alive.
Right. No, that makes actually, it brings something up that I hadn't thought of, and I knew this would happen while we were talking. I own a business, clearly, and I have a family. Should I have a power of attorney for my business as well? Because my husband is not part of my business and he wouldn't know the first thing about how to run it.
Right. So, yeah. So you certainly could have two separate powers of attorney, but usually a well-drafted for you, it would be important to have a well-drafted power of attorney, and you would want to make sure that there are provisions in there allowing your power of attorney to manage your ongoing business. So a lot of times if you're just downloading kind of a form power of attorney off of a computer, that may not have the provisions that you need. So yeah, I had a situation years ago where a friend of my parents, he owned a construction company, a small one, but he did have probably about 10 employees. And unfortunately he was in his late 50s and he had a massive stroke. Well, meanwhile, he was the only person that had access to all of the, the business accounts. So his wife couldn't get in. She couldn't pay the employees. She couldn't pay the bills. Her hands were basically tied. So if he had, just a power of attorney that included those provisions, that would have solved that problem for her at that time. So that's an example of how useful that power of attorney could have been for her.
Right, exactly. So, well, and I want to talk about, and this happened in our family, the importance of long-term care planning. In our family, my mother-in-law had a stroke. And, if we did not have a plan, if we didn't have it, then it would have been a lot harder. And because you're already dealing with the emotional part of having someone in your family, someone you love, have a stroke, and now she's incapacitated and we're trying to figure things out. At least that was something we didn't have to think about. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, the statistics show that 7 out of 10 people over the age of 65 will need some type of skilled nursing care at some point in their lives. So, you know, again, we emphasize people to think about this. It may not happen, but it's always better to be prepared if it does, so that your children aren't scrambling around at the last minute trying to do crisis planning. So with pre-planning, there are a lot more strategies available that we can use to protect assets for the family, to protect assets for the healthy spouse who is not in the nursing home, to make sure that the family has enough money to pay for that nursing home for a parent, and not have to basically deplete all of the family resources and assets. And, you know, unfortunately, when that does happen and people haven't done planning, you know, a lot of times it comes down on the children, and then the children become financially responsible, or, you know, they feel like they are responsible for caring for a parent in a nursing home. But nursing homes in Maryland average, if you need skilled nursing care, it averages $9,600 a month. So you're talking $10,000 a month or $120,000 a year. I mean, not many people have money to be able to afford that type of care if they don't plan ahead of time.
Right, exactly. And the other thing, and we're going to go on to this subject, so maybe I'll just put it up there. Yeah, we talk about, do you have to be older or wealthier? But I just spoke with a friend last night. He's 26 years old, and he had a stroke. He had some issues before, and then he had a major stroke, and now his mom is taking care of him, and he's able to do some things, but he's not able to take care of himself completely. So it can happen younger. You know, I had another friend who had a motorcycle accident. So the long-term care is not just for when you get older.
No.
So,
yeah. And I'm just going back to those types of situations, even when, you know, in Maryland, or well, in the country, when you turn 18, you're an adult. So, you know, a lot of parents think they can call and they can get information on behalf of their, you know, college age child, but they're not going to give you, with the new Privacy Act laws, they're not going to give you a lot of information. So, you know, really everybody should have a financial power of attorney, because that would give your parent the ability to get information for you if need be. So if you were in an accident or something happened, you were away from home, and parents need to deal with these things for you. It's such an easy thing to get done. Right. People think it's hard, but it's not. It's so easy to get done. And then once you have it, you have it. So
right.
It's really important.
Well, it's interesting you said that, because our oldest son went to West Point. And one of the very first things they said was, you needed a power of attorney. It was the very first thing they said. And the second thing was they made him get insurance. My other son is bringing me water because I was choking earlier. So thank you, Ethan. I'm live though. So sorry. So we did that, but it never occurred to me to get it for my other children. It never occurred. So that's a really good. I knew that talking to you today was going to be very informative in that way. I knew that was what we were going to talk about. So, but then the other thing is, people think they don't have enough money, so why bother? Right. So why bother planning?
Right. And, you know, I think even, you know, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, most people, you know, were focused on estate planning meant, you know, tax planning. And that may have been the case because the limits for, you know, estate taxes were a lot lower then. But now with the estate tax exemptions are so high that most people, I mean, you have to have $11 million to be subject to federal estate tax, and over $5 million for an individual from Maryland estate tax. So, you know, not a lot of people are subject to that. So really the conversation that I have most of the time with my clients is asset protection and the care of minor children. So, you know, if you're 24 years old and you have a baby, you need to appoint a guardian for that child, because you know, of course, I see all the worst, you know, I see the worst cases that would come into our office because something has gone wrong, you know, back in the day, and they would call and say, well, what can I do in this situation? And it was always heartbreaking when you tell them there is no solution at this point because it's too late. But, one of the situations where it would happen in my family law, when I did family law, was, if something happened to parents, you would have the two sets of grandparents fighting over custody of a child.
Right.
So you want to avoid that. So if you have a will, and usually I'll do a separate nomination of guardian, saying that, my desire is for this person to care for my child on a day-to-day basis, and this person to manage their money as a custodian or a trustee. Even though the court it has to do what's in the best interest of the child, that goes a long way, and that tells the world this is who the parents chose to care for their children. So
right.
People need that, because I have seen it where families are fighting over custody of a child, and it's heartbreaking.
I'm sure. Yeah, it sounds like it would be heartbreaking. I cannot even imagine. So, all right. This is where
I was going to go back to the asset protection, but go ahead.
Yeah, no, go back. Go back to the asset protection. You were here.
Yeah,
right?
it kind of ties into the next topic, but there are ways, and depending on the goals and objectives of people. So, when we meet, I get all their information. I try to find out if there's any disabled children, if there are any children with substance abuse problems, if there's any history of that in the family, if there are any concerns about one child or another, or, if they've just people who have spent their whole lives accumulating, assets and property that they want to pass down to their children. We can protect those assets from creditors, predators, and divorce. So, a lot of time if people inherit money and they subsequently get divorced, that inherited money, depending on how they've handled it, would be subject to the marital claim. So that would become part of the marital assets. And then the spouse would get half of their, the person's family money that they inherited. So I've seen that happen a lot of times. And there's ways to prevent that. So you can protect this money to pass on to your children, and know that it's going to be protected, and they're, it's going to be there for them in the future.
Right. Right. So I want to talk about that. You're talking about strategies to avoid probate and provide asset protection. And even when I read this, I thought, oh, I'm not smart enough to have this conversation. Right. And I think that people are afraid of talking to an attorney because they don't know enough, and they're afraid they're going to come off as not knowing enough. So tell us a little bit in simple terms, what does it mean? What is, how does probate work, and why, how can you avoid it, and how can you help with that?
Yeah. So probate, basically, people say, oh, what is probate? Probate is the legal process of filing a will and making distribution of assets pursuant to the will. So I have so many people call my office and say, oh, well, I have a will. I don't need probate. That's why, I have a will to avoid that. No, if you have a will, you're guaranteed to go through probate. You have to file the will with the court. You have to appraise and inventory all of the assets. It's all public. It's not, probate is not the worst thing in the world, as a lot of people make it out to be. But it also does not protect assets. It doesn't provide any asset protection. It does, subject assets to claims by Medicaid if any benefits were paid by the state of Maryland for long-term care or nursing care. So there are some downfalls, but certainly, wills are fine for a lot of people. But that's the probate process. So you can't, if you inherit a piece of property through a will, it just doesn't automatically become your property. It has to go through the probate process in order for it to be transferred into that person's name. So it's really, it's just the legal process. So yeah, I mean, unless you do this day in and day out, you're not going to be familiar with how it works or what it means. But so that's kind of, hopefully that was an easy explanation, but it's the legal process to transfer assets of a deceased person.
It's very helpful. And so it leads us to something we had not put down here, but I think is part of this. So instead you can do a trust. Is that correct?
Right. So a trust would avoid probate, and there are pros and cons to a trust as well. A trust avoids probate if it's funded properly. So that's one of the, the key components. And it does provide the asset protection. It basically allows you to control your money from the grave because you can put conditions and controls on how that money's used in the future after you pass. But I did have a friend of mine, his mother had told him, oh no, everything's great. I have a trust. You're not going to have to do anything. Well, come to find out, he calls me frantically one day saying, my mom said she had a trust, but I don't think anything's in it. So I did a little investigation. I looked up the deed to the property and I had to call him and tell him, no, nobody ever transferred the property to the trust. And he was kind of devastated because not only now he had to deal with the trust, but he had to probate all of the assets to eventually make it into the trust. So he thought he was going to avoid that whole process, but he didn't. He had to go through it all. So he was not very happy when he found out that nobody had ever funded the trust. And by funding the trust, that's basically just transferring assets to the trust.
Okay. Well, and that it makes total sense when you start thinking about this. And like I said, there are a lot of things that will keep somebody from calling an attorney. One is that they're afraid it's going to cost too much. One is that they think they don't have enough money or they're not old enough to be worried about it. And then they think they don't know enough, right? So it's really interesting to hear you talk about this because I think too often people think they can do it on their own. They can go and get a form off the internet. They can, and then they're covered. Right. And that's not the case. So tell us again, remind us again, asset protection. What exactly are we talking about here with people's homes or people's children, or what are we talking about here?
So, I mean, there are a lot of components to asset protection, but I can give you some examples. So if you have, I'll use it, it's a big problem in today's age. If you have a child that has a problem with alcohol abuse or drug abuse, if you have a will and you just name them as a beneficiary in your will, they're going to just get $100,000. Let's say they get a third of the estate and it's $100,000. They're going to get $100,000 just given to them outright. It's going to be in their hands. How likely is that $100,000 going to last them if they have a substance abuse problem, or if they're in recovery? Is that going to put them back into the situation because they have all of this money available to them? So that's one example where we can put that money into a trust, and we can have, trustees or co-trustees that's going to oversee that money, kind of give a check and balance. So the parents can make sure that that money is going to be used for, food and shelter and a car or car insurance, and to make sure they're cared for.
Right. I actually, Tara, I just watched that happen. I have a friend who, her husband passed. His will, it gave him the money directly, gave the son the money directly. And it was a lot of money. It was, I think, $500,000. And he got it completely. Within 2 months, he ended up on, his drug problem was back, and he ended up in jail and then dead. It was the saddest outcome I've ever seen. So it's so important to think about. It really is.
Especially, and people who have that problem, they just can't control that impulse. And especially if they have that much money available to them, a lot of times statistically, it puts them right back into, substance abuse, even if they were in recovery for a long time. Another example is a special needs child. So if you have a child who has special needs, or if someone, was in an accident, had a brain injury, and they're reliant on government benefits. So if they're getting medical assistance and all of their health care is being paid because they have this disability, a lot of grandparents think, oh, I'm going to leave, my grandchild this inheritance. It's going to be great. They're going to have this money. Unfortunately, that's the worst thing you can do, because then that child loses all their benefits. They're completely ineligible because you can't have more than so much, $2,500 in Maryland to receive those benefits. So there are ways that we can divert that money into what's called a special needs trust, and that money can be used for that child and still get their benefits. So it wouldn't ruin their eligibility for those benefits. They would get the benefit of both. So that's one thing that we're always looking for and asking if there's any disabled family members, because people obviously people don't know, and they would have no reason to know unless they go through it or they're a professional.
Right. No, absolutely. Absolutely. And I knew, again, I've been doing your social media. So I've been through your website about 300 times now. And I knew when we talked, I'm like, I'm going to find out so much more than I even thought I already knew. So this is really, really helpful. I want to talk that you said this. I asked you what you want to talk about, and you said how to protect assets in a blended family. I had not even thought about it. I have the same marriage for almost 30 years now. So it hadn't occurred to me that this could be different.
Well, yeah, I mean, as everybody knows, there's been so much talk, what is it? They say the divorce rate in the United States is 50%. But I do have a lot of clients and, and again, this is not something that you're going to think about. And I don't expect my clients to think about this until I start asking questions. So if we go through scenarios, so if we have, a Brady Bunch scenario, wife has 3 children and husband has 3 children, and if they've blended their family, so they have 6 children. So I'll give you, a scenario. People say, oh, well, okay, well, in my will, I'm going to leave everything to my husband. And then when he passes, it's all going to go to the 6 children. Or, vice versa. When husband passes, it's going to go to my wife. And then when she dies, in her will, it says it goes to the 6 children. Well, the scenario comes up very often that, let's say, wife passes first, everything goes to the husband, then the husband gets remarried. So when he remarries, then his new wife is going to be included in his will. So let's say he leaves everything to the new wife, and then when he passes, the new wife has everything. And then a scenario which is not uncommon, everything goes to the new wife's children. In that situation, both the original wife's children get disinherited and the husband's children get disinherited. So the children who were meant to receive all of the monies of the parents basically can end up with absolutely nothing. And yes. I've had people call and say, what can I do? Can we contest a will? And I'm like, I tell them, no, there's nothing we can do. That's just, that's the way wills work. And that's how your parent wrote their will. So that's what we're stuck with. But and I have these discussions and I give them the scenarios. Okay, well, what happens in this situation and what happens in this situation? And then, I can see people's eyes, bulging like, well, we didn't think about that. And I said, well, that's what I'm here for. This is why I'm asking these questions so that we can start thinking about, what would you want to happen in this scenario? And what about this scenario? And then it's my job to create a plan that's going to do what they want, what they intend to happen. That's my job to make it happen.
Right. Yeah, it's crazy. I'm so sorry. I'm almost speechless because I'm going, oh my God, how many things am I not thinking about? How many things am I not considering? And yeah, we didn't talk about this before we came on, but we're going through this pandemic. This is, basically a once in a century situation. And people are, they either don't have a power of attorney or they don't have a living will. They don't have all the things set into place. And now you're talking about blended families as well. And it becomes something so much bigger. And I do know, again, I have a friend. How many of us don't have friends who have gone through something like this? Mm-hmm. It's really sad. It's really, really sad. So, all right, we actually are almost out of time, but I have to bring it up anyway, because first of all, as someone, I have a transgender child. And so as someone with a transgender child, I'm always happy when I find a company or a firm who specializes really in that area as well. And you said there are special needs for people in the LGBTQ community for estate planning.
Well, yeah, I mean, and it is a special scenario, because you may be, you may have a partner that you've lived with for 30 years, but you're not married, or you don't have a domestic partnership. And if you don't have a domestic partnership or you're not married, but you've been partners for 30, 35 years, under the law, you're not entitled to anything. So if you don't have certain, these documents in place, whether it be a will or a trust, and, powers of attorney, your partner is not going to have any say in what happens to you. So if you're in the hospital, the doctors will not let you make decisions. They're going to look to the parents or the siblings or the children, and not the partner. So that can be a really heartbreaking situation. And, I've heard of that happen. I've had people call and say, well, we're not married, so how do I ensure that my partner is going to receive, what I want him or her to receive. And that's just a discussion that, we need to have so we can make sure that everything is in place and it's going to happen the way that they want it to happen. So,
Right.
it doesn't, I think a lot of attorneys will give, at least free phone consultations. And I know I do. So, if people have questions, just call. Don't be afraid to call and ask questions. I mean, you need to be informed,
Right.
and you need to know what you don't know.
Yes. Well, and that's it. Somebody said to me the other day, well, if they didn't know that, they should have asked. The problem is you don't know what you don't know, right? They thought they knew. And that's too often what we hear. I thought I knew, right? So I want to mention something, and it's you can get it at frameandframe.com. You have some handouts, basically, some things to give people that will help them, guide them through this process and what they need to know. So can you tell us a little bit about what you have to offer there?
Yeah, so we've been really working hard on some guides. We have some checklists. So one is a family protection planning checklist, and it just gives you some topics to go through to make sure you've thought about these things, that you're covered. So it is a really basic checklist. And if you have something that you haven't checked off, then you would want to call us so we can help you get that in place. We also have a long-term care planning checklist and a wills, trusts, and probate guide checklist. We also have a new long-term care planning guide coming out, and that's basically more substantial. It's about 33 pages, and it's going to be a lot of good information about long-term care planning. Yeah, so, we are, we're here to help you. We're here to answer questions. Right now, we are still going to continue doing Zoom conferences, teleconferences. I found a lot of people really enjoy doing this from the comforts of their couch, as I say. So, you don't want to come to my office. Let's just set up a Zoom meeting, and I can try to answer your questions and, get you started on the process at least. So if you go to our website, there's a lot of good information there, and we have some really good guides to at least get you thinking about these topics.
Right. Well, and I will say this, I have a lot of clients. I work with a lot of people who don't give away that sort of information as freely as you have. And that, I loved it. I went through every single one of them. I answered the questions. I used them. And it was so helpful. It was really, really helpful. So if you have not gone over there, please go over to frameandframe.com and grab those, download them for yourself. And then if you need anything, call Tara. Tara, I do have one more question before we go. How long, like if I want to have an estate planning meeting with you, how long is that process? Is it one meeting? Is it multiple meetings? How does that work?
So generally my process is a lot of times I'll have a telephone conversation with you, find out kind of what you're looking to do. I have a questionnaire that we send out. So this will give me a general idea about the family setup and the assets and the income and all the financial pieces. And that gives me a better idea of what we're going to discuss and what you're looking to do. And then we take it from there. Then we'll schedule a meeting. It's usually no more than an hour. And like I said, we've been doing Zoom meetings and teleconferences to really delve down into your objectives, goals, any issues in the family, what we need to address. And then just, if you decide to move forward with the plan, generally it depends. If it's a will plan, it's probably around 30 days. If it's a trust plan, the whole process might take 60 days. Okay. That's a little bit more of a process to create the trust plan. But for the most part, around 30 to 45 days would be average if it's a more complex plan. But if it's a will plan, like I said, within 30 days, we can have everything in place.
That's amazing. When you think about it, the people think, because you're saying 30 to 45 days, and people think they can go pull something off the internet and do this themselves.
Right.
That's really, it's interesting.
My philosophy is, and my philosophy is that, no two families are alike. I mean, nobody has the same situation. Everybody has different issues going on. And I think they need to be addressed, and to do it properly, you need to kind of delve into those issues and find out what's going on. What are the family dynamics? Has there been an estranged child that they haven't talked to, but they still want to include in the estate plan? So there's a lot of things that we talk about that, a form on the computer is not going to differentiate between those various issues.
Right. Well, I think what you do, I put it out there this morning and said, please watch this because I think it's so important. I think it is more important than I even realized until we really got to talking. And like I said, I have read through your website, 100 times. So it says a lot about what you do and how you help people. So I'm very, very grateful that you came on today. Thank you so much.
Well, thanks so much for having me. I really enjoy giving out this information and educating people, and hopefully, we give information so they can make informed decisions and do, what they need to for their families.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, guys, I want to tell you real quick before we go, I have no idea what we're doing Wednesday. And I know that is not like me. I've been able to tell you tomorrow we're to have this. I have a plan. I want somebody to be on. I'm working with him to get him on because I think it's really, our audience is small business owners. Our audience is entrepreneurs. And I have a person I want to talk to you on Wednesday. So that's the plan right now, if I can get him. If not, we have another plan and we'll let you know what it is. I'll keep an eye out here at ASMM. You'll see what we have coming up. As soon as I know, you will know. But I will see you again Wednesday morning at 10 a.m. Tara, thank you again for coming. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.